Usually most people see.
That's very.
Yes.
Are we on time now? Welcome to Portland. How many are from Portland here? How many from Northwest? How many from out of town? Long way. Wow.
I don't know about
Good, good. Well, Portland changes weather like it normally does. It started hot yesterday, and once it showed what it looked like when it's cloudy, which is most of the year. Our goal, which we're going to wait for Portland if we can, we usually like to show a little rain. But welcome to our city, and welcome to the convention. I'm glad you're all in here. We got a bet who's going to show up with the most of which group. So I'm doing the first mile, last mile, and the second one after this is autonomous, and it's more or less a subsection of this one. So this one and then autonomous as it relates to the cities. The first thing I got to do is my CEO, who is in the audience, Mike Gerard back there. I have to always first pay homage to the company to make sure you know that they're still not paying me. But here it is. And let's see, it's supposed to be moving, but it's not. Try it again. Yeah.
First slide, last slide.
First slide, yeah. First slide. Get the hand up, it's up here. Try again. Okay, so we actually, from the mobility cube side, I'm in two companies, one called Urban Systems. You guys have been seeing them all weekend. They're the ones who are building vibrant cities. We've been involved in smart cities and GTCC since the beginning. And I'll go into it a little bit more later on, or at least more in the questions about why it's important to us to look at it, or how we actually originated and got into smart cities to begin with. But we build this type of vehicle, a family of vehicle that's all battery electric, low-speed vehicles operating 25 to 35 miles an hour and around the world. And normally in dense urban settings. So this is a bus that we developed directly for the Philippines, purpose-built, purpose-driven, and I want to get into that when we get into how the world is changing. Electric vehicles are interesting in that you can build a family of vehicles for a specific purpose. Now the advantage what we found is it has lower parts. And these are a couple of vehicles that we have. This happens to be up at a Rico station. It was a resort car built from Mexico in St. Lucia, but especially for that reason. Now, what people don't know about electric cars, that thing is strong enough that you can actually climb a wall. I mean, it has a lot of torque in these small vehicles. So our mother was a golf cart, but our father was a Porsche. So the way we look at it is electric vehicles built right. There'd be a whole lot of difference. So there's some more reasons, especially when we're going to get more into the smart first mile, last mile. The ability to have handicapped vehicles, especially built vehicles for security. We see a variety of cars being built. So Mike, that was my sales pitch. So you got it. Now here's the rest of the story. And this is a story that's actually more dear to my heart, why I'm actually here. About 20 years ago, I actually started a company with a group of guys called Jet. And we built that company from scratch, from 5 cars a month to 150 cars a day at the end of the time we sold it. Somewhere in the middle of that, Chrysler showed up, John Deere, Toro, Lee Iacocca, GM, and Ford all showed up at our door to buy. And so we had this great hockey stick growth. Everything was great when you looked at us on paper. But in between, it was a lot harder. We started out at that company with almost nothing. Had to eat what we killed, like most startups are today doing to do first mile, last mile. And somewhere in the middle of it, we figured out what was happening. And it took us to the middle to figure out. We started to understand what was truly disruptive in a company and how those companies changed. And we started to believe not only in what we were building, but more important, what we were doing. And we were finding out that when we went to cities, or we went to master plan communities, or we went to air forces and airports, and all these places that electric vehicles were not as good as a gas car, they were better. And if you priced them right, It wasn't a matter of what we think of them today. They can be priced right. These vehicles, 3 cents a mile out. So they were cheaper to operate. That bus that you saw has 300 parts. These vehicles you have less than 3,000. A car, regular car has about 3,000 parts. That has 300. The other vehicles we have maybe 400 parts. But everything kind of changes. And that's going to be really important in first mile, last mile. Because to really scale in first mile, last mile, to really go into a city and make that difference, to finish the puzzle piece, where mass transit connects into the next environment, it has to be affordable. It has to be scalable. And that's what we started to learn. But what we also learned was that world 20 years ago was a whole lot different. Batteries didn't work. I mean, flooded batteries were the first thing that this came out of. And the reason is this whole market started from golf carts. So disruptive markets are really funny. They're usually not built by a big company. So what was happening was people were taking their golf carts in Phoenix and in Palm Springs and converting them so they could go to the store. And nobody was noticing that people were converting their cars meant they were looking for something different. And they were looking for something less expensive, easier to move around and connect. And so we created law and got out there and thought about it and created this company, which again, we sold for a lot of money to our investors. My investors all made a good chunk of money and were happy, which is unique in an electric car company. And we were everywhere. We were from Japan to Egypt, places around the world. And exciting to us and what's going on. The next thing that happened, though, once you start learning that, and I got the opportunity to study real hard why it was doing what we did, because we never really quite understood. We just knew we were selling a $10,000 car, no doors, made in Fargo, North Dakota. What really was, after you studied it, was all about population growth. It wasn't what we thought it was. The reason we were selling to master planned communities is because they needed densities. The car industry wasn't created in 1900. It was created in 1950. It was created by new urban. It was created by those building suburbs. They had cheap land. I could build houses. Eisenhower came back and found freeways and said, well, I want to connect them for security reason. And suddenly people had to go to work. How am I going to go to work? I'm going to go to work in a big car. And that whole industry was created with suburbs being created. Now the difference comes up. 1991, new urbanism starts to move. Guys, we can't get cheap land anymore. We need density. I need internal destinations. I need everything. And then you travel to California and you hear them complaining about, I can't get my permits. And you'd ask people why. I think I can't get them because we can't afford utilities. Does this sound familiar for anybody in the cities? I can't afford the police. We can't afford building new freeways to get out there for people to get under the traffic. How do I make that different? Well, put in internal destinations, put in car share programs, put in ride share programs, put in cars that only go 35 miles an hour and can't go on a freeway. And the city said, okay, we'll give you a permit. And the cost of a parking spot, which again, she'll be real familiar with us dealing in smart cities today, parking spot at that time in Los Angeles was worth $60,000. And if suddenly I could get somebody out of their big car and get rid of that parking spot, I could do something with that parking spot. Today in Los Angeles, that same parking spot is worth anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000. So those developers were looking for answers. The same way we are looking for answers today. We know that the problem in the city is parking. That's the number one reason for Uber today, is that there's no parking spots in cities. So what's ended up happening is we're seeing this change now play out. We're seeing that it is where people live, work, and play. It changes the way cars are built and the way transportation is. And so we sit in these groups around here looking at that and saying, how do we meld this together to make our cities better? How can we do that? I bring up this city. So I get called out by a congressman to go out to Manila, Philippines. They want to change taxes. There's 250,000 taxis in a city the size of Portland. In Manila, 14 million people in the daytime, which I learned really wasn't true, because they have no idea how many people are in Manila at any given time, because people are coming in from the outside. So what ended up happening is I went over there and he said, let's do something, and we went with the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Transportation, and he said, no, not taxis, please. What we have is jeepneys. You guys brought in Jeeps in 1946, and we've been living with them ever since. We grew them out to handle 16 people. They get in the back. They are the #1 polluter. We met with doctors over there who said that every 10-year-old child has some sort of respiratory disease. the pollution was so bad, 3 days there, you'd be sick, and you were outside. And people were stuffed in these jeepneys to do that. And we're losing $50 million, $50,000 or 50 million pesos or something like that a day, just in the cost of transportation. They were on the street, people are on the road 3 hours a day. They had an average of 8 miles per hour. And the reason I bring that up to this room is because I went over there thinking transportation in Seattle couldn't get any worse. And I got to Manila, and I thought, oh my God, it can get a lot worse. In fact, it can get a lot worse around the country. So we ended up looking at that and said, how do we get around it? How do we make a difference in a world like that? And the answer was pretty evident. It's not more cars, it's less. Somehow, you got to get those cars off the road. There's no place to put roads anymore. You got to figure out answers and angles and things to do to get it out. And it just so happens that the real problem to mass transit, and I'll give you an example in this city. They spent $2 billion bringing in mass transit. That moves 2% of the population. The jeepneys move 40%. So when you have to look at when you start looking at the solution to the end of the trail, you should look different than what we think. And I think that's the one thing I would like to say. The best things we can do is think different. We're so used to it. I get to present to the DOTs around the country, and the question, because I'm for-profit businessman and they're for service, we haven't yet got our acts together. And I think the opportunity to look at, instead of bigger and bigger buses, is to look at our city in multimodalities and saying, you know what, the best way to move is walk. The next best is bike. The next way is small vehicles, whether it's a auto rickshaw or whether it's one of the little NEBs that we have. And lastly, it's those that connect those together. How do we connect them together? What's the best way to connect it together? And if we can solve that problem, if we can solve the problem where it is easier for people to move, they'll do it. So the things that I grew in the last 20 years were, first of all, we didn't have the technology. Lithium batteries today last 7 to 10 years, created by the smartphone, created by computers, created by everything else but us. But the reality is we're taking a huge benefit because now I've got batteries that have lasted 10 years. They don't burn up. The right ones don't burn up. They don't leak battery acid. They last 7 to 10,000 cycles if you do them right. So we see massive difference being done with the way vehicles are being transported. Now you see cities going. We see the technology move forward. We're now seeing massive amounts of vehicles. This next presentation will be about autonomous. And when you take the driver out, the whole vehicle perception changes. Is this thing going to be a box? Is it carrying goods? Is it what can we do with it? What size is it? It doesn't matter anymore, right? I don't have to carry people. That's going to change the way vehicles are if we think correctly. That NEB that I showed you, in cities, that's 81 cents a mile. Autonomized, 41 cents a mile. So this is no longer just a decision about whether it's better. This is a decision about economic strength. So what we want to do, if you can do anything, I'm sorry it's taking so long, because I want to get the panel up here. I got a really good panel, but is to think differently about which way we're going forward. So I do have a really good panel, and I wanted to bring them up right away. So I won't show you all this. This stuff is just, I'll leave that up as a tease. Next time. I want to bring all my guys, all the people up. I was lucky. I got what I think is the best panel. So I'd like to first introduce Oregon Health Science University. So Brett, come on up. So why don't you take a seat? We'll get to, each one is going to get 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have question and answers. So the neat thing about, how many have been to OHSU? Okay, yeah, incredible place. I'd seen Brett's transportation plan, and it is scary, and it's Brett. And one thing that they have done, and I did want one more piece, and I'll drop back to. The thing that has changed the most from what I started was the first thing that was always told me about electric cars was Americans will not give up their cars. Since Uber, nobody asked me. And that world has changed. And the social aspect of what's changing is massively changing the way we think as well. And the nice thing about the OHSU plan is they look at that. So it isn't just about vehicles and transportation and which way we're going to move up the hill. The tram itself I'm going to steal your thunder with 10,000 people a day.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So Brett's got a lot of experience. Your team, you're what, Tram and Transportation Department Director, right? And I'm not going to go through all these things. I realize we're going to be here all day, but he's got a long list of what you're going to do, and he's literally the best transportation plan I've seen from anybody. So I'll do that. ECAL. Where's my Chris? So Chris is founder and CEO. They're partners. Chris and Chris are partners. So they get it mixed up all the time. One's with a K, one's with a C. K, right?
I'm the C. He's the better looking one.
Started using low-speed vehicles in Austin, Texas, and now branched out to St. Louis. Entrepreneurs that are doing an excellent job. They've got more than anybody. They supply the driver, they supply the service. And I'll let him tell you more about it, but I think excellent entrepreneurs, excellent business model. And my goal is to move them to Portland. So we're trying hard to get him to come up here. Kent Lucas. Kent's 30X Partners. Kent works in business development, finance around the world. He's got places in Israel, Korea. And Ken, I'll let him tell you all about it. He's got a long history in New York, raising capital for entrepreneurs, for companies. Incredible guy. Met him in Washington, D.C., part of the GCTC family. Okay? Wes, come on. Wes is from Oracle. I don't know if we have to say anything more from Wes. He came all the way from Chicago. He is doing smart cities the right way. I want to thank him for doing that, and we'll go from there. So we got about a 7 to 10 minute presentation. But Wes, I'm going to start with you. You're not going to use any slides. Wes is going to do conversational. So.
Do you want me to grab a mic or just, can everyone hear me?
Here, testing? I think I got it.
If anyone can't, just tell me to be louder. So a little bit about what Oracle's doing in smart cities is, and in particularly in transportation, is a little different than what you might hear from other companies. We focus on it from a software perspective. Oracle's, for those who don't know, is a 140,000 person or so company, depending on the day. Global company that focuses almost solely on software, with a little bit of hardware from a server perspective and a little bit of infrastructure when it comes to telecommunications, but primarily a software company. And my group, which handles smart cities, which is inclusive of public transportation, focuses on how we can not just think about this from a public transit perspective or a smart intersection or domain space company where we're looking at niche solutions. We look at the overall picture about how this works within public-private partnerships. We look at how the private sector interacts. And what we've been doing is developing a roadmap around transportation that takes it step by step on how you can incrementally get to not just a smarter city, but a smarter region, a smarter country, and then a smarter world. And so the way we lay this out is by improving citizen experiences, first and foremost. You have to focus on the constituents and the residents that you're affecting. So that's sort of our step one, so to speak, on what we're doing. The next step is not just understanding who's riding public transit rides, but all the other ride services, whether it's working with Chris and Chris from ECAB and Microtransit. If you've been down the Arch area in St. Louis, they have a great service, and you get people who ride the rides from all over, but that also needs to coexist with the Uber and Lyfts. And if you take a St. Louis example, that could be Bi-State Development Agency or light rail or buses. And so those are just a couple examples about what you need to integrate. So you need to bring all those assets together to be able to not just work across those assets, but have multimodal transit that is frictionless. So I think some people have heard of a company called Amazon. Just for show of hands, I'm sure there's a few. So who's heard of what they're doing with a grocery store? So taking the idea of frictionless and putting it into transit, we've changed from multimodal to intermodal. We're calling it frictionless intermodal transit because fit sounds a lot better than whatever you want to do when you put an M in between. So, but the idea of being able to go between modes, understanding where your assets are, understanding where your riders are going to be, not just within the public transit system, is very important. So step one, understand your riders. Step two, understand your assets and start to become operationally more excellent. There's already regulations and rules to get from reactive to proactive maintenance in public transit. There's already best practices leveraging AI and machine learning to understand how to better run your business from a public transit perspective, and that has to integrate with Department of Transit in cities. It has to integrate with some of the other, if you're looking at bi-state cities, Kansas City is a good example. You have St. Louis is another good example in Missouri. You have a bunch of other agencies that cross borders, but those cities, for the citizens, they don't end when you cross that border. Their experience goes beyond that. So we're looking at how we can not just take that and make it inclusive experiences. So that's where we engage businesses when we look at transit systems, especially in the bi-state compact areas. And what we're looking at is how to monetize data that we're collecting from a transit agency when buses are potentially going out of service, or we're looking at alternative rides, understanding where riders are going, where they start their day, where they end their day. We're looking to encourage people to ride because it's not just an experience of point A to point B, but it's an experience of we're growing ridership by connecting them within their community. So you think about the payment mechanism people pay for. It's not just a tap card. If that card can help you, maybe if you even get rid of the card, we can help it buy you Starbucks. So when you get off your ride in the morning and you have a coffee ready, you don't have to go into the Starbucks app. It's already part of your public transit experience. And that public transit experience might include microtransit, Uber, or Lyft, if that's more efficient, faster, cheaper, or most efficient, whichever ride mode you choose to go. And so when you think about that, we're bringing private sector revenue into this model. And with the model, we're able to actually do things like subsidized rides for those who need it. We're able to look at cost offset programs by creating an advertising revenue stream that doesn't exist. Currently, most transit agencies have some form of advertising revenue stream from wrapping buses. They have it from putting different placements on bus shelters. But within a digital medium, that's not something that's been greatly pursued within transit. And so when we add that, we're not just capturing where people go from place to place. We're not just understanding operationally what we do. We're taking it that next step, and we're looking at it from an economic development perspective, because transit's not about going from point A to point B. It's about connecting people to opportunities and providing them different things to do, whether it's live, work, and play, whatever persona that you fall into. And once we have a lot of that in place, what we're able to do is we're able to look across cities as different cities adopt these data models. And what Oracle's doing is taking a leadership perspective and putting together the data model to enable this across cities. And so when you think about that idea of frictionless intermodal transit, is step one, understanding your operation, understanding how you develop local relationships with business, is in what we're calling as digital space monetization. We're taking it to the next step to go to intercity transit. And that intercity transit model will enable payment across cities, so that when you go, say, from Portland to Seattle, or Portland to San Francisco, or across the country, you have these same services across public transit to make it an easy user experience across not just the traditional modes of bus, subway, streetcar, but you'll add in other services on a city-by-city basis, depending on what's available, microtransit, Uber, Lyft, and some of the other players in the space, because each city has its own experience, and what we're trying to do is make sure that transit works for all cities that we work with.
Thank you. Well, ask questions after we finish. Everybody gets a chance. So you can come up here and show you where the button.
Okay. We'll see if we can get everybody out of their food coma real quick and get going. So I'm Brett with OHSU, and I want Jenny's here too, so she can pipe up and answer questions. I'll put her on the spot on some of this, as she was the project manager for a lot of this.
For those of us who are out of town, could you tell us what OHSU stands for?
Yeah, so Oregon Health Sciences University. So we are a level 1 trauma center, medical hospital, and then also a medical school, and we've got nursing, pharmacy, all kind of up on top of a hill. And we started to expand in a lower location down the south waterfront. So in terms of our population, we've got 16,000 employees, about 3,000 graduate students, 1,000 patients. So any given day, we've got about 20,000 people up on the hill that we deal with. And the parking inventory for that 20,000 people is 6,500 parking stalls. So what that gives us is a great opportunity to look at last mile a little differently than most people. So in terms of mode split, how do our employees get to work? We've got only about 38% are actually driving alone. So that gives us about 62%, or on any given day, 10,000 employees that we've got to get to work differently than what the standard walk out of your house, get in a car, drive yourself to a parking lot, get out and walk in your office building. So we're looking at about 10,000 people we've got to deal with and try to get them to think differently. Be that public transit, bike, walk, carpool. That's where we get into all the different programs that we've rolled out as part of our transportation demand management plan. Our numbers for the last kind of 10 years is, we were a kind of a 50% drive alone rate, and we've been kind of slowly ratcheting that down 1.5% every year. Where right now is we've aggressively taken on that we're in expansion mode as an institution. We're not going to build much parking along with that expansion, so we're going to drop our 38% single occupancy vehicle down to 30% while we grow. So we've got major challenges to bring forward. How do we get more people? That number is going to go from 10,000 to probably more like 15,000 that need to come in a non-single occupancy vehicle. So what we did is we developed a transportation demand management plan, so TDM plan. Out of it, we came up with kind of 34 plays that we're kind of levering and trying to figure out which ones work the best. Out of those, we had 7 that we kind of said are high impact, high priority, and we've jumped on 4 of those in the last year. And I'll kind of run you through what those 4 are real quick, and then during the Q&A session we can talk some more about them. So what we've got, so one was the lift. What it is we've got a lift off. We found with us being a hospital, we're a 24/7 operation, and what we found is, public transit works great during the high commute times in the morning and the evenings, but we've got big gaps during the other shifts. So we rolled this program out, so anybody that works and gets off work or comes on to work between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., we actually give them a $15 lift credit. And what the thought there is there's usually public transit available for them on one leg of their commute, but not the other leg. So like our swing shift employees, we were basically forcing them to all be single occupancy vehicle drivers because there was no transit home when they got off at midnight. By doing this, we've got them now parking at transit hubs, and then when they get off in the middle of the night, they're able to lift back to that transit hub and out to the community where they live, versus what it was in the past where they're having a single occupancy vehicle all the way in at 3 in the afternoon and then back out at midnight. So it's been a huge success for us the last couple of months. We just rolled it out, and so it's one of those we're really building on, but it did take care of that off-peak that we really struggled with, because we're really working with trying to get TriMet, the public transit agency, how do you get buses for us at 11 o'clock when that shift's out? There's just not the volume there, so we've gone this route instead. Second one is Scoop. So carpooling has been one of the ones we've worked on, and we've always struggled with it because a lot of our shifts are not the standard every single week, 9 to 5. We've got nurses that are working 3 days a week, maybe 2 days a week. They're 3 on, 4 off, and they rotate and vary all the time. So what we did is Scoop is a dynamic carpooling that is you can kind of carpool somebody different each shift or every single day. So in the afternoons, you schedule your tomorrow morning's ride. Most of our employees knew what time they're going to work tomorrow morning, so they can schedule that ride. And then in the morning, that night they'll get matched up. And let's say Jenny and I are going to commute in the morning. It worked great. That was what time we're leaving. And then in the afternoon, I've got to work late. Jenny's getting off early, so she schedules her Scoop ride or home at 4 o'clock. She gets matched up with somebody else and gets home. My 7 p.m. ride matches me up with somebody totally different, and I get home without any issues. And so instead of having being a locked-in carpool with the same people every day, this gives us that ability to go dynamic, and each day it can be with somebody totally different. The biggest win out of that is it's been amazing how many everybody's like, I've got a new BFF today, because every day you kind of get date matched with a new ride, and then every afternoon it's somebody else. And from an OHSU standpoint, it's been huge for our community in terms of getting to ride with different people that they've never met, and all of a sudden there's a crossover and there's this common bond of, hey, I've got to work the same day as you do, Mondays, so I'll see you next Monday. So it's been an exciting program for us. Then we launched a commuter platform. So this is really how do we track what you're doing and how do we incentivize you to do it. So we run incentives for biking and walking. We're doing badges and different kinds of incentives and drawings for if you ride transit. It's just an engagement tool. So what we've rolled out is a Loom mobility platform that offers people, this is kind of a look at the calendar for the last couple of weeks of what somebody's done. Shows what day they rode, what day they walked, what incentives they've got, how much it costs them. Our carpooling, our ride sharing will all be fed into this as well. So if they ride share today, it's going to show up. If they carpool another day, it'll show up. And what we'll start doing is building badges off of this and really getting people to, we'll reward those things we want people to do, the walking, the biking, and then we'll reward the, that single occupancy vehicle drive. So we're going to charge more for parking and ratchet that side of it up or reward the other side. So it's kind of that carrot and stick mentality. Next one up is telecommuting. So as an institution, we have not been great at telecommuting. I think we've always thought, hey, we're healthcare, we all have to work and we have to come to work. So we're really working on a cultural change within our institution of, no, there's a lot of days that you can telecommute. You don't have to be a full-time telecommuter, but certain days a week that you can do it, and we're really trying to drive that home. So that's one of the big projects we've got is, it's part of first and last mile, but just do it all at home today. No, don't even come in is going to be key to it as well. And then we have got a great opportunity coming up. So as of tomorrow, we shut the aerial tramway down for 5 weeks. So we've got a major maintenance project. It's been scheduled. We knew it was going to happen. But so what we've got is on a daily basis, we move 10,000 people with the aerial tram. That's 5,000 people up to the hill and 5,000 people back down at night. Those 10,000 people are not going to be able to utilize the tram for 5 weeks. So we have pulled basically every lever that we've got, and that's kind of the 4 strategies we just ran through, plus a bunch of other transit, e-bike, different bike share things that we're going to be doing over the next 5 weeks. So in terms of a case study, we'll have some presentations coming out this fall of how it went and what the wins were and what changes we've made culturally. And our goal is coming out of this 5-week closure is that we made a big leapfrog forward in terms of reducing SOE rates. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. Now, what I've noticed is when I'm trying to find the right one on here, it never seems to come out. So let's see who pops up next. Chris, I'm aiming for you. Let's see if I can pull it out.
Brett, was the scoop internally generated at OHSU?
So Scoop, so Scoop we've been kind of looking at it for last year, and we went and we really met with them and worked with them to get them to come to Portland, and it's really set up as a kind of a business area or an institution they come into, and so we really work hard with Scoop to make that collaboration and make it work for us.
Where are they based?
San Francisco. Yep. Sales pitch.
You did great.
Yeah. Has PSU talked to you about trying to replicate some of the things you're doing?
Yeah. Yep.
With Dan's Alpo?
Yeah. Yeah, we're working closely with Ian and Dan and Jeff and yeah.
Great.
Go ahead and keep asking questions. Here. There's 2 displays on here. I get the display on here and I can't get it on there. So that's what's going on. I'm looking for figuring out how to do it. So.
I got a question for you. How long did it take before instituting the badge program that you started seeing people competing and actually trying to earn them? I think it's a fascinating approach.
Probably the first week. I mean, yeah, because the way it rolled out is like basically when you enrolled in it, you were kind of badgeless and nameless.
Yeah.
And the first ride or the first walk you did, all of a sudden it was like, hey, you just earned your first one and congratulations. And it just all of a sudden caught fire. We did roll it out right when Portland has the Bike to Work month. And so we really grabbed that, all of the publication and everything was going with that. And we stuck badges in based on that. So if they rode a certain amount of days during the Bike to Work month, they badged up. And so, yeah, it's gone really well. And we did some buttons and some other visible stuff, so it wasn't just digital. That's been helpful too. So it's kind of that badge of honor people got on their backpacks now and that kind of stuff.
Can you drive different modes through it, like by creating different badges?
We will be able to, yeah.
Drive usage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, really, the tram shutdown, we've been planning for that for like 2 years now. And like a lot of these tools that we pulled we're going to do this, we're all activated because of the tram shutdown. It gave us that opportunity of like, hey, we have to have this installed and running by June 23rd. So all this stuff kind of broke free this spring just because of that, critical thing that was going to happen. So we knew we had to have some things in place for the tram shutdown. Yeah.
Do you have places that don't have very good drop-off locations?
We do, most of campus. Yeah, so and that's one of the, I mean, we looked, with Uber and Lyft, especially ride shares, we did a lot of geofencing, we did a lot of venue mapping to get certain particular drop-off and pickups that work the best for us in place. So, I mean, if you pull up one of those apps and you say that you're going to OHSU, it all of a sudden, it drops pins on there, and it almost like directs you to go to where we want you to, because we venue mapped it. You can still override it and get dropped off like right where you want, but what we found is all the patients are just going to right where we direct them to. So when they go OHSU patient, it puts them right into that front door drop off that we developed. Whereas if they go OHSU employee, it kind of puts them on back of house drop offs. And so, I mean, by being able to venue map has probably been the biggest asset of those two programs, to just get drop offs to function for different people, different uses differently. Yeah.
As part of that, did you also venue map your pedestrian spaces?
We have not yet. Yeah, so we've got some pedestrian maps, like pedestrian specific, and we've got we have another layer that is more ADA mobility type specific, but we haven't done the venue mapping to that level. It's kind of coming next. And over the next year, we'll try to figure out how to do that.
Do you have like a LiDAR map or some high resolution topo, given how hilly it is up there?
That's where we build that into those layers. So, we've kind of gone off all right, let's figure out what the mobility map looks like. And a lot of that is interior through a hospital to go, 9 stories of an elevator to shoot you out on another level to get you where you need to.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that we've done. And we've done a lot of interior, like kind of the main corridors to shoot the, kind of a 360 bird's eye so that people can pull up on their phone and kind of route themselves utilizing what we did on the videos on the interior wayfinding. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have your own shuttle service also, right?
Very small. Yeah, we have a really small one that we run.
Is that something, I mean, just curious about connectivity between that and Martin Transit?
Yeah, so we run, one from up on the hill down to downtown, and that's just kind of a circular that is just running kind of 9 to 5, and it's one to move between. We have a couple of locations downtown plus the hill, so like people for meetings and staff is just kind of always going so they can jump on it. But we also see heavy use in the AM and PM as it gets them down to light rail. So we run right by a light rail stop, so that shuttle kind of flows into light rail. So a lot of our employees utilize shuttle versus mass transit to get to the rail lines. South Waterfront, we've got the same thing. It's really a circulation that runs around there. It's only a mile from one end to the other, so it's a 2-mile loop. But we've still got a lot of people that would rather, if there's one there, they'll jump on it just to kind of not do the walk, just because it's a little far. Like if it's raining here or something, we'll see higher usage.
So are you looking at making those autonomous?
We're looking at autonomous. We're looking at electric. Yeah, those are kind of the next steps of how do we isolate those routes and just take them autonomous, and that's really what we're looking at the next year or two to figure out how to do that.
Are those employee shuttles or?
They are.
Okay, yeah.
They're employee shuttles, but we at the same time, because we have patients, they're not like a badge on only type of shuttle. We're if you are standing there, we're going to pick you up and move you along the route, and if you're a tourist that jumps on, you're going to get the ride to the next route, just because we're not going to stop just because we don't know if you're a patient or not. So we do move everybody. Yeah.
So right next door, the FAA and NASA are doing a session on, what do we call it, aerial mobility on demand. Is that something you'd consider in the future as well?
Well, of course, right? So we're already going aerial. We've been aerial for 12 years with the aerial tramway.
I'm attached to aerial.
Right. So we're still attached. I think we're going to be able to. I mean, obviously, if it works and it starts moving people and we see successes, then we're going to want it to go that way. Yeah.
Are you finding that the cost of housing that's pushing folks to live further and further out, making it more complicated to make these connections?
Yes. Yeah. And we really work with the regional transit agencies of trying to figure out that. We find if they've got to make more than 2 transfers, it's not going to work. So as we've got new employees coming in, or there's a new housing that's really coming online further out, if it's got 2 transits in it, it doesn't work. They won't take it, and so that's where we get stuck with. That's not going to be a good spot unless we can get express lines or something else put into that to make it run. Because we struggle with that. Like everybody else. Yep. All right, I took up enough time. Sorry.
Can everybody hear me without the microphone?
Yeah.
I kind of sound like the voice of God on one of these. I'd rather not. Okay, I'm Chris Nielsen. I'm the CEO and founder of Electric Cat North America. What we do is we operate the largest fleet of low-speed electric vehicles for hire on planet Earth. We started in Austin, Texas 10 years ago. I was an anthropology student, just got out of the Navy. I needed to have a job. So I worked at the Omni Hotel downtown. It was really cool. We had a lot of celebrities, we had a lot of politicians, and one thing that we have in common with all of the demographics is every single night I would get screamed at. Like without fail, it would happen. It was because I could not get a ride for anybody under 2 miles. It just would not happen. A taxi driver would avoid hotel after 5 p.m. like the plague. Uber and Lyft is the same thing. I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I have their number. Why aren't they showing up? But then I had a taxi driver explain to me, it's like, it's just not worth it for us to lose our place in the queue. I'm not going to wait in line for an hour to get a $3 fare. And it made sense, but I'm sitting there thinking, like, why am I getting screamed at? I don't work for Yellow Cab. And I was standing outside, I was fuming. I couldn't understand why everybody was taking out all the frustration of mobility on me. And then I saw a golf cart drive down the street with a license plate on it. I'm like, oh my God, that's the solution. Now, I knew nothing about mobility, how public utilities even operate. All I knew is I was tired of getting yelled at. And so let's just create this new platform. I had no idea what I was doing, cashed in my 401k and quit my job, and how hard could it be? Oh boy, I was wrong. But yeah, that was in 2008. We started with these kind of funny looking vehicles. One of them was made in Oklahoma, the other one in China, and then we kind of pivoted towards the vehicles that Ken was nice enough to produce, and started using the laws that he was nice enough to create, you know, CFR 571.500, but who's paying attention to that? What we do is we move people around in densely packed urban cores, and we connect to mass transit. That's the big one. Everybody's talking about how mass transit ridership is down in Austin and St. Louis and other areas, and they're saying it's because of Uber and Lyft, and really that's part of it. But if they want to stay relevant in the 21st century, they have one edge over Uber and Lyft, is because they have the ability to make capital-intensive infrastructure projects like rail. Uber and Lyft are not going to create a billion-dollar rail system. It's just not in their business model. So what we do is we have our low-speed vehicles just parked right out in front where the trains drop off. The passengers just kind of pile off, get in our vehicles, and we take them to their last mile destination. We created an app just because people thought that we needed the app. We don't need the app. You can use your eyeball app to get in the car app to get to your job app. I don't get it. Everybody's just so focused on it. But when you're parked right out front, you really don't need it. But we got one anyway just to make everyone happy. With these vehicles, turns out we're moving a lot of people. I mean, in each area, our vehicles are moving between 500 and 700 people per month. And it's, we've been doing this for 10 years. One of the hardest things is like the dirty secret about low-speed electric vehicles, and I think Ken actually said it perfectly, they don't just break down, they get murdered. Supply chain is very underdeveloped. Dealerships don't even know how to work on their own products. So what we did is we partnered with United Rentals. They provide all of the CapEx, they provide all the vehicles, and whenever one of our vehicles breaks down, I can just call United Rentals and they just swap it out for me. It's completely seamless. Now I've got to figure out what to do with $100,000 worth of tools that I don't use anymore. Right now we're operating around 60 vehicles. We are growing as fast as we possibly can. I mean, it's we're kind of, everybody calls it a sweet spot. I call it the holy crap, I'm stressed out every night spot, because Chris and I are flying all over the country and everyone wants our product. I mean, I spent 9 years trying to sell it. Now everybody wants to buy it. It's like, oh boy. So what we do is we partner with municipalities, we partner with employers, and we also partner with developers. Developers are our favorite clients. I mean, it's private sector, they have big budgets, they can move quickly. We don't have to go to 27 meetings to get something done. Like with Endeavor, that was a 10-minute meeting. And that's been a contract that's been ongoing for 2 years. They hired us to provide microtransit just for the Black Friday month, just because they wanted to move people around, and it was supposed to be a small little pilot, kind of a nice thing that they did for their customers. That was 2.5 years ago. We're still operating. We've turned into a service that, by their description, they can't turn it off. Too many people use it, and they like it. So the way that works, the business case for it is we just bill Endeavor Properties, just one invoice, then they turn around and they bill out all of their clients. And whenever you split it up 14,000 ways, it turns into nothing really quickly. It's that nobody even notices it as part of their management fee. We have connected fleets. This is one that was built by SciTech. They created an autonomous vehicle for us. It looks really cool, and no, you can't ride on it right now because that thing costs way too much money. It's just not practical yet. But we do have it, and moving forward, we do have a platform to build upon and upgrade it. The way that we're going to be deploying autonomy this October as a demo in Austin is rather than just have one autonomous vehicle that's just making decisions for itself and driving around the street. That scares me. What we're doing is a concept called Follow Me, where we have one human driver that's in a gym in the front and then an autonomous vehicle that follows it around. That way you have a human that can deal with any situation that goes on. And as somebody who's done transportation for 10 years, you can move 1,000 people with no problem, but it's that 1,000 first that you're gonna have to, let's just say, have a little bit more of an interaction with. There's a reason Taxi Cab Confessions was on HBO. But what we have is we have real-time telematics. We can tell the state of charge, how many miles, how many passengers are in each vehicle in real time, and we provide that dashboard to our clients. And that's an example of one of our dashboards. The way that we monetize our data is we just show it to all of our clients, and they have a way to get a real-time ROI. Like, why am I giving you all this money? Right there, that's why. And that's actually an example of what we're doing in downtown St. Louis. It's showing how many people are staying in hotels, how many are going to Busch Stadium, and that ticker on the bottom is real-time ridership. Like that updates every 5 seconds. We get their gender, age group. Those are both guesses, but educated guesses. We can also get a kind of a trend on when the high frequency times are, low frequency times, and that's about all we do with that. That's our app. Our app's cool. It works. Geolocation isn't that groundbreaking technology, but yeah, if you want to use an app, you can get us, or you can use your eyes, or you can call us. All three, we'll take it all. But you really can't mistake our vehicles. It's not like you're going to hop in the wrong one. Yeah, that's just more of the autonomy, which I think is really cool, but it's just not ready to be deployed yet. I know that everybody's been seeing the headlines about Navi and Easy Mile launching in all these cities. The thing that you don't see is they launch for a week to do a demo, and then they go away. It's not an actual service yet. The infrastructure just isn't in place. So this is that's what we work up at Endeavor. Not bad for a pilot program. Now we've got like fixed stops, and we're just operating around. They don't need Cap Metro. They just use us to connect them to Cap Metro, to where they can deploy their assets to places that really need them. This is where we're working with Pecan Street and the Department of Energy. We received $1 million grant to do first last mile transit. That's where we're working up the domain, connecting people to the Kramer Lane station. That's downtown, where we connect people to the downtown light rail, and then on the left is Rapid Bus, and then that's the dynamic service area around that. So on this route, the route is a dynamic route. If you stand on this route, a vehicle will come by and you can flag it down. But if you're on that route and if you need to go anywhere else downtown, we just pop off, drop you off, and go right back to it. That's the type of thing that tends to make regulators kind of explode because they don't understand that part, but when they see the dashboard, they get it. And then down here is Mueller. This is where we're going to be doing the autonomous demo. This area is where all the retail and mixed-use commercial is, and that's only residential. So this is where we operate in a constant frequency. That's on demand. And in downtown St. Louis, it's the same thing. We operate in we're paid by the Capital Improvement District, which is a downtown business alliance. We operate all over downtown St. Louis, fixed hours, and we connect people to and from the bi-state rail lines. That's the media coverage. I always like to show my resting angry face. See, I'm not always mad. But yeah, everywhere we go, we always get really positive press. We haven't spent one penny on marketing in 10 years because we haven't needed to. And we're partnered with Pecan Street. They're the people that process they brokered the Department of Energy grant. Tiny Transit is urban planning organization. Polaris creates the vehicle, or they manufacture the vehicles that we use. Adaptive Motion, that's the brainchild of David Brummer, formerly of 5D Robotics, and he's our CTO now. He's been helping us with all things nerd that I don't understand, but we really need. And United Rentals, like I said before, they absorb all the CapEx, and all I have to do is make a phone call, and I get another running vehicle. It's really cool. And thank you for your time. Oh, that's the wrong contact. If you need my contact, just get a card for me.
Hey, Ken? This thing takes forever because they're not matched up, right? Why don't you get up just so we can get a story? I know you can, I think so.
Okay. I was going to wing it anyway, not because I really was going to wing it.
Yeah.
So these guys had real case examples. I have a couple of real case examples that I was going to talk to, but just 2 seconds on what I do. I look for companies like this. I advise and invest in all types of startups around mobility, and more into smart cities. And my background is in investing and advising, and hopefully giving startups and teams advice on strategy, scaling, marketing, ops, biz dev. Right now I'm working closely with a company in Europe that does advanced driving simulators, simulating technologies for autonomous vehicles and for fleet safety and insurance applications. Also a company in Israel called Fleetonomy that might have some application for you guys, which does route optimization, vehicle assignment, route planning, multimodal fixed, and work with the cybersecurity. So I kind of pick and choose different spots of where I spend time on. I'm always looking for new ideas and new companies and people to meet and get involved with. In last mile, I think it's a very fascinating time. There's a picture that I had up that I will quiz you on, but the auto industry first is, there's a quote that goes up, that's the saying by the CFO or COO of GM. More has happened in the past 5 years than has happened in the past 50. And we have this whole confluence of Industrial Revolution 4.0, right? Just sensors, computing power, all these technologies that are coming together that are creating rapid advancements in technology and deployment around electrification, around autonomous vehicles. So there's a push effect where venture capitalists are pouring money globally into these technologies, and I use the term bubblicious. Stuff's really happening, and there's so much money being deployed, and particularly in last mile, as we're seeing it. So the Uber and Lyfts are trying to figure out if they'll ever be profitable on one hand, and they're trying to capture the whole ecosystem from the beginning all the way to the end. And so they're going into cars, they're going into drones, they're going into boats, they're going into scooters, they're going into bikes. And it's a real problem, not only for people, but what I won't talk much about is delivery and logistics, right? It's delivering packages to remote locations. Can we do that autonomously? How do we capture that and get rid of the driver on one hand, or get rid of the polluting truck that goes out that last 5 miles to that farmhouse? For people, it's making it more efficient. And the societal benefits are real, so everyone's touched on it. For the elderly, for the disadvantaged, for children. There's so many applications of why this last mile, getting from your home to that transit point, which I buy into. That transit point, I don't think goes away. And I grew up in the area of Queens, which was, if you're familiar with New York City, we have Manhattan and we have 5 boroughs. And I was on the furthest part of Queens, non-stop traffic, probably 35 minutes to Midtown Manhattan, 40 minutes. But it was a 2-zone bus stop, a 2-zone transit stop. So we took a public bus, about 35 minutes to the last stop on the E train into Queens, and that was another 45 minutes into Midtown Manhattan. And that's what people commute and still do, still that's their commute today. And that last stop on the bus line where I lived was only a 4-block walk to my house. And that, I almost wanted to put that map up today because I don't live there anymore. I live in Midtown Manhattan, so I don't have to worry about that commute. But those are the problems that people need to solve. And I mentioned this briefly, so my dad, he started a transportation company, the original jitneys of these big transit vans that were taking people from our neighborhood, nurses and doctors who were commuting, who were working into the city. And they would pick them up at their doorstep and take them into the hospital on the Upper East Side. And that was happening 15, 20 years ago. So that problem existed then, and it still exists today, but it's now being solved. It's a real problem. So my advice, I think on my slides, I was talking to startups, talking to smart city people and organizations, is make it happen. If you're a city, take back your city. Why does Uber, why does Lyft, why do they have to make money off of this, right? Line Bike, all these guys. And here in Portland, I think Lyft purchased the bike share, Bike Town, which runs using Uber bikes. So you guys preaching to the choir, but why, I don't know. Is the city of Portland making money in this exchange? I'm sure. Why not charge for that? Why every time someone rents a scooter and they're paying $2 to rent a scooter, why not say, hey, I want my revenue? And so what's happening, you're seeing this huge overabundance of this microtransit. So the question was, I had this map, this picture was a graveyard of bicycles. Maybe you've seen it in China where they have just all these oversupply of bicycles out in no man's land, right? And now we're seeing that in San Francisco and Dallas and Phoenix, and residents are starting to say, hey, what's going on here? So, and now they're starting to tax and charge you, write a ticket, $250 ticket if these dockless bikes are left in the street or left in the fire zone, et cetera. So I think there are ways there are ways to capture revenue from this microtransit if you're a city. And obviously you're a startup, you're gonna hopefully capture a lot of revenue. And if you're a corporation that's trying, you're a Cisco or an Intel, you're trying to find ways to capture revenue. So I think it's a really exciting time, and things are changing, and things are moving too fast. But things are moving too fast, and now it's time to kind of take a step back. I think the number was 40 bike platforms in China, and over $2 billion were invested in it in 18 months or something. That's crazy, right? So something has to slow down and kind of retrench, and I think it gives the opportunity for cities, smart cities, to take advantage of and capture it.
I apologize.
Let me just
I'm just making it confusing for everybody.
I want to just make sure I captured a few more comments, and then.
I can pull it up for yours on here.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, why didn't you tell me that? Okay.
You were really doing well.
Okay, let's see. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was this, what I mentioned earlier panel, was this PPSP, term I made up, and where the public-private startup partnerships, beyond PPP. And again, why can't we have startups, because that's what I focus on, why can't startups be part of the conversation when you're dealing with these partnerships?
There you go.
Okay, that's fine. So, and part of my rationale is big boys don't have all the solutions to these problems. They don't have all the technologies. And startups have access to new sources of capital, which was something we talked about earlier, right? The startups are funded by VCs, they're funded by angel investors, high net worth individuals. So another means for cities to actually have another source of funding to kind of fund their smart city initiatives. So, and with startups, they're quick to test, they're quick to demo, quick to pilot, and quick to say, hey, no, this doesn't work. So you can do, a lot of startups are happy to do a no-cost, unpaid pilot. They prefer paid. There are ways for cities and municipalities to actually try things out, try new technologies out. So, I mean, it sounds like you guys have been very proactive and aggressive with implementing new technologies. So I think that's really important. And then the other one is thinking about adopting a formalized process. So for last mile solutions, there's, let's see. Yeah, this one last slide and I'm done. But there are a couple, or there's an organization, a venture fund I'm involved with in Israel that does these, it has an accelerator, but it's also more of a commercialization program. And I talked about this earlier today, but why not have the city say, hey, we want technologies around last mile, first mile solutions. And there are venture funds, there are other programs, there are companies like myself. They say, hey, I can give you 20 companies that you might be interested in, and I can screen them for you, or you can look at it, or the accelerator in New York, TechStars Mobility in Detroit, will help you figure out what technology suits your needs. And there are just creative ways where we can access technology and help solve this last mile solution. So then the last one, there's a company in Israel called Route Valet, and they are taking a holistic approach. I can't show it, but it's all around the citizen, which is the other theme we've heard, or in this case, the worker or the hospital person. And you receive the app, it is software based, you receive a request, and it knows your exact location, and then it takes in Uber, MTA, Via, Juno, all types of modes, multimodal, and says, here's your best optimal way to get from point A to point B. Nothing novel, but to synthesize all those different applications, whether it's the bus, the train, or Via or Uber. And then it says, okay, well, we know you don't like to walk as much as the next person, so here's a suggestion. Or we know you don't like to commute on the train this evening in general, because it's a machine learning algorithm that picks up your preferences. And over time, it gets to know you and says, here's your best way. Every Monday in the morning, you prefer this way because you want to stop at Starbucks. So and it is app-based, and it learns over time. So there are a lot of technologies out there that I think can help solve this last mile solution. So hopefully that was informative. And sorry, I can send you the slides.
I apologize. I don't send it to you.
Okay.
So a little longer than we thought too. Questions? It's a good time to bring up questions. I can ask questions, but I'd rather get some from you.
I have a question for the ECAB. So it sounds like you're just able to be very agile in creating routes and testing them out. I mean, have any of your routes been so successful that they graduated beyond the capacity of your service?
All of them. 100%. We would like to use a technology platform, AI, actual intelligence. We don't really use route optimization or app dependent. We just rely on the actual human brain's processing capacity. And that in a lot of our circulator routes, we found that it's the same people that are riding every day. So then once we find that out, then we know exactly when to pick them all up. We know which trip, which train everybody's going to get on, and it's pretty seamless. And the fact that the passengers don't have to pay out of their own pocket, their employers pay for it, or the municipality or the developer. Then neighboring areas hear about it, just like in St. Louis, we started out in Capital Improvement District, and we've already expanded out into Kirkwood and Clayton, and we're about to be in WashU, so it's a big hub and spoke type expansion.
I guess, did any of them become so successful that it's like, we got to get a 44 bus in here? Or were they already so small that they were never going to be?
We work where buses don't make sense. Like it costs a lot of money to operate a $500,000 bus that has one passenger or two passengers driving around. We have seen situations where we've had to put more vehicles out on the road, but that's a hell of a good problem to have because we charge by the hour. So I like those problems.
Hi. I guess I'll address my question to both of you as well. So you talked about the heterogeneity of your consumer base, and one point of heterogeneity is special needs commuting. But I didn't see any ramps on your buses. Could you talk a little bit about that?
We're actually they finally came out with an ADA ramp. This is very recent. We just found out about this. We are outfitting them, but with every transit authority that we operate with, we have a button on our app, on our website, and we can also dispatch them directly to the paratransit service wherever they are. Now we're pivoting to be able to start handling that on our own, but the way to fit out a low-speed vehicle with an ADA certified ramp didn't exist until just a few weeks ago. So yeah, we've got the orders in. That's going to happen in about 12 weeks.
So I guess to address a larger question regarding smart cities, I think a lot of lean operations start out without an accessibility option, but then as they graduate, they will have to address the needs of 21% of the population. And I'm wondering how you're thinking about that in general, not just...
I'm glad you asked that, because whenever people think, and I'm also glad that you addressed it, it's actually 21% of the population. It's not just the small 1.5% that's in the full electric assist wheelchair. That's the one that we really were not able to serve, but the rest of them, like vision impaired, hearing impaired, learning disabilities, we've been able to take all of them. Those we can serve all day long. The sightless turned out to be a very large market share once we started reaching out to them. I mean, but they obviously, they call us on our dispatch line, we come and pick them up, we take them to the doctor. It's a lot faster than the voucher program that Yellow Cab had with the city of Austin. To give you an example, like whenever someone who was sightless would need a ride to the doctor, they would have to call Yellow Cab, which is contracted through the city. The cab driver has to fill out 8 forms of paperwork, and that guy doesn't get paid for 60 days. So do you think he's in a hurry to come pick up that person? It really isn't. So they have to have a 5-hour window, and that's just not right. I mean, we're not supposed to do that in America. So we're making it a lot more efficient, and now that we're able to add the fully electric wheelchair assist, we can now serve 100% in 12 weeks. You have a question?
I have a question. I'm sorry, I missed part of this, but did anybody talk about the small mini cabs?
I'm sorry.
Electric small mini cabs?
That's exactly what we have.
But yours look like a bus almost, instead of like, where it's like one person driving and like 2 or 3 people in the back.
That's exactly what we
Oh,
operate.
okay.
Our vehicles have 5-passenger capacity. I think you're thinking of his vehicle, the one that's 16 passenger, is it?
Oh.
That would be an example of we have too high of capacity, then we'll use one of his vehicles and not one of ours.
Okay. And what solutions have you found for parking them when they're not in use? Parking when they're not in use?
Oh, you park it and plug it in. It's
Do you have a parking lot that you?
Oh yeah. We figured that part out. Like, you know, whenever I first started, I was that lost-looking guy holding an extension cord, going, "What the hell do I do?" But it's that was 10 years ago. That part we've got figured out. We usually just broker something with the entity that hires us.
Okay, and so do you have people? So you're like kind of like we're talking the last mile here, because you're kind of like the first mile going back home.
Both.
And so, okay, so what happens at the other end? Is it another center that you're taking in?
Mm-hmm. In Austin, where we're operating in 3 mobility hubs, we take them to the train that gets them to work, pick them up on the other side, and take them to their job. Whenever they're ready to go, we pick them up at work, take them back to the train, come back to another stop, and then we take them back home. We're only in 3 spots right now. It was only $1 million project, only $1 million. But where we're operating, we're seeing a very high retention. Almost all of our riders are repeat customers. But we don't see that many new faces, and we're running out of capacity, so we're doing something right.
I think we have time for one more question. Anybody have it?
About families. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Well,
We have time for 2 more questions.
well, I don't need Mike. Wes, is it right from Oracle?
Yep.
So you were talking a lot about Oracle's space in this and all these things that you guys are kind of dabbling or involved in. Where are you guys helping out?
So there's a few different cities that are at different stages of the process with us. We'll use DC as an example. So Omada uses us for the customer experience piece. So DC Metro, basically, that's the first step in the process to get to this much more complex opportunity. And like I said, you break it out first on the residents that you're serving. Then you go to the operational piece. Then you're going to the monetization piece. And then you have the capability to go beyond that to multiple cities. So we have cities across the world. We have Cotral internationally is using us for the operational piece. You have on the private side, SoftBank for their mobility as a service scooters. They use our technology in the operational pieces. So there's a lot of examples throughout the world that do different, you call it dabbling, but different stages of the process. And they're all going in the direction of how do we interconnect this public transit opportunity, and that can't be a single service or just public transit or just last mile solutions. It has to interconnect, and most people aren't going to do 3 or 4 connections, but 1 or 2 certainly is a very doable process. Does that answer where you're looking at? Yeah, great.
Did you have one question?
Oh, if Kevin's not going to, I will.
Okay, take it away.
Related to the Oracle thing, I'm going to go back to you too. You had mentioned something about a data model that you were developing. Is that going to be an open data model that anyone could adapt? Or is it something that's going to be proprietary, as in Oracle only?
No, this is not proprietary. So the model is going to be based around how we collect, what type of data you're going to be able to collect. We want to make sure it's compliant globally, which means we certainly cannot own it. Different countries have different compliance standards. Canada versus the US versus Europe, very different currently. I think that might change. But the next piece of it is when you're looking to monetize the data, and you're looking to do different things with it across cities. So if we want to know, say I like a burger and beer, and when I go to New York City or I come to Portland, I want to have those same capabilities, and I want to understand the businesses that I'm going to interact with. We have to understand those across cities. We have to make it so that there's a user experience, and we have to be smarter on how we direct people to what they like, because what they like in a different city is probably going to be some flavor of what they do at home. And so the idea that we can not just enable that, it also has to go back to the payment mechanisms that enable those experiences across modes of transit. There have to be open data concepts put in place so that systems like Uber, Lyft, eCab, any of the public transit systems, trying to all work together in a positive manner. And that's a concept that can't really be just kept in one company or one private sector group.
It takes everybody. I want to really thank the panel for Kevin. Ken, I apologize to you for the breakdown. So we got 15 minutes. The next panel is actually a subset of this panel, which I mentioned is autonomous. We got a heck of a panel. So 15 minutes, I guess we started, I think it's we're coming, right? 3 o'clock? So yeah, a quick break, and I'll get this damn thing fixed.